Greetings, everybody. Scott Stevens here with another perspective. The title of the show is we look at some of the things going on around the world, other situations, and with a viewpoint that may be a little bit different than what you're accustomed to, or certainly what you can feast upon in the mainstream media, but nonetheless, it is a little bit different. What I would like to speak on today are some of the changes that are going on in the world, and we definitely know that those are underway. We've got a raft of changes, and what is kind of most concerning is what do we do financially? And with this COVID event underway, we know we've got changes. We've got at least $3 trillion in stimulus that have already happened. That business is baked in, and even today, in Congress, on Capitol Hill, we're doing this back and forth as we try to figure out how best to afford and to keep the old normal going on and into this new period. And as we know, when these big cyclical changes happen, that there can be struggles. It's like a cat in a bag. The old wants out and to be free and to run, and then we still want to kind of contain it so it serves the situations, the structures, and those things that we have already grown accustomed to. We've handed off to the kids that we're simply invested in. So we're kind of at this threshold. So I'm going to call this the fourth turning in how to prepare. We'll head off in that direction. The fourth turning is kind of a new term. It describes how through a person's life we have four cycles, four parts of that life, and some generations are born into the revolution, others are born into the birthing, others are born into the Renaissance part. And so there's all these different generations, this stream of children or stream of adults that all come into a turning at whatever stage that they are. So life in all of its forms is locked into these cycles, these three aspects of life. And there's a part of religion, mythology, and so forth and so on that I don't want to say honor, but worship where we are. We're either born, we live the life, and we're in death. And in Hindu terms, they've got Lord Brahma, which is, in Hinduism, it's the Taramitri, the three forms, a concept in Hinduism in which the cosmic functions of creation, maintenance, and destruction are personified. These beings aren't real, but they are powerful energies nonetheless. They are personified by the forms of Brahma, the creator, Vishnu, the maintainer, preserver, sustainer, nourisher, and then Shiva, the destroyer or the transformer. And this is the Hindu triad. So how they originate is the triple deity, the supreme divinity of Hinduism, in which the cosmic functions of creation, maintenance, and destruction are personified as these triads. And typically Brahma is the creator, Vishnu preserver, and then Shiva the destroyer. So we're all great excited about a revolution and a new birth. And then you've got to set up the systems, structures, and so forth to maintain and sustain that. And then eventually a power comes along and says, this isn't serving the people that are embedded within that system. So everything is created or born into existence, then sustained and nourished and giving it life. Then it is destroyed at its time of usefulness simply concludes. Its time is written, the last breath is taken. And everything is subject to this divine process. So the question has to go to, what about civilizations, nations, and then their inherent economic systems? When Rome fell, it was because they were simply overextended economically, that a portion of corruption, of graft, of debasement of the currency brought that great and grand empire to a halt. It fell. And when it fell, it was very, very easy to drive into the heart of Rome. The Rubicon had been crossed, and that essentially was the end of that empire. So everything, even our own bodies, come into that life. Now I've lost my audio. We're still there. Okay. And so even the sun eventually goes through these same kinds of cycles, where we have sunspot cycles. So this for me, as I'm looking at this much smaller cycle, we've got a larger solar cycle, and then certainly we've got cosmic cycles, which are like a whole Earth precessional cycle, which is a 26,000-year cycle where we deal with the Golden Age, the Silver Age, the Bronze Age, and then the Iron Ages. So life is truly nothing more than cycles inside of cycles inside of cycles. And if you happen to be born, let's just say in this day and age, this is not something that's typically, we're talked about. We turn on the TV and we're dealt with the horrors of the day or the one or two feel-good stories. But we're not ever made aware of or consider the context of where we are in these grand cycles. So even the sun gets in on this game. In fact, our sun might even be, if not the primary contributor to how long these long wavelength cycles impact human behavior. And if we look at the solar cycles and the energy put out, let's go back to 3000 BC, so the better part of 5,000 years, where we had the greatest solar energy and hence the warmer temperatures, we saw civilizations peak time after time after time. And when the sun goes quiet, and the energy output reduces, then we're subjected to greater cosmic energies that can be more disruptive in nature. And then the 18th dynasty, sank and collapsed as the sun went through a quiet spell. The Phoenician peak, civilization thrives once again. It's got to come out of the chaos. It's got to come out of the down period. Again, for every down, there's going to be an up, part of the cycle, and then the inverse is always true. See people's invasion as we get to about 700 BC, the Athenian peak, then the Athenian collapse, and the rise or rose of China. Then the Roman peak happened about between 1 and 100 AD. And then as the sun turned quiet once again, the collapse of Rome and also the Mayans on the American continent. And then the Mongolian, Byzantine, and medieval peak happened as the temperatures also maxed out at 1300 AD. And then we turned into what was an epic drought across the western United States and through Mexico as well, and that leading eventually to the fall of those civilizations. And whenever the oceans cool, that's less water vapor in the atmosphere. That's less cloud cover. That ultimately leads to drought. Yeah, they're fascinating correlations, Tracy. Utterly fascinating. And it's kind of, it's so simple. A doctor, we have this issue. We're right here. Then we're going to see this impact on the human body. And if we step back and look at the solar system as the same kind of thing, with the sun being the heartbeat of the whole thing, then we can begin to anticipate, we can begin to project, we can begin to see relationships in ways certainly economists have, and so have geologists, and so have historians and archaeologists. They all recognize this cycle. But in a 24-hour news cycle, these bigger processes are completely and utterly lost. So we've kind of come out of the little ice age from about 1350 AD when it began to turn down, and we really didn't come out of it until the early part of the 1800s when we began to see some of that warming. And then that has led to the Industrial Revolution, that led to the American Revolution, and ultimately the age of I guess enlightenment is relative, depends on the situations you were in prior to that supposed enlightenment. And the same is true, especially as we look at China. And I'm not going to go through all of these, but as we can see the gradual up and downs, if we use the central Greenland temperatures between 4,000 years before present to the present time, that there are some fascinating associations in China and when these dynasties collapsed as compared to when they thrived. What were the situations physically, geophysically, with the sun, with the climate? Because if you can't grow food, or if you can grow food, but you can't get that food to harvest, you can't get that food to market, then we have a problem. And without a doubt, it leads to a reduction in the population. And once that cascading effect begins, it's very, very difficult to reverse because there is a consciousness, a mood that has changed. And we'll kind of get to that because the Chinese have a very interesting way of how they christen, adopt, accept new leadership. And it's essentially kind of the will of heaven. So a new dynasty in China will appear by restoring a peace. and appoints loyal officials, redistributes land to peasants, land that had been collected by previous land barons, by the previous power grab from the previous dynasty. It builds canals, irrigation systems, roads, and repairs defensive walls. And then after several generations, the new dynasty becomes an aging dynasty with problems. Then that aging dynasty begins to neglect its appointed governmental duties. It ignores corrupt officials, loses control of the provinces, and allows defensive walls to decay. Now, defense was always a thing. You had to have the walls to keep the marauders, the mongrels, those kind of other, from their eyes, more degenerated societies than from theirs that had risen to an age of enlightenment. So that eventually they have to impose heavy taxes to pay for those luxuries that are enjoyed by the few. We're familiar with that. So this aging dynasty loses the mandate of heaven. That is the word. When the power structure loses the mandate, then the will of the people eventually will take control. So the problems end up being floods, famine, and earthquakes. Invasions, because the society, the government, the forces are weakened. Then you're dealing with armed bandits in the provinces, and the peasants ultimately revolt. And then after the revolt, after the invasions, after the problems that are flood, famine, earthquakes, then eventually a new leadership can come to the forefront. So an ancient Chinese historian tried to understand the dynastic change, and they came up with this theory, the cycle. So it's kind of the same thing. The population increases, problems arise, limited resources, rich, poor. It's the same cycle. And if we take this template, we can then apply it to nearly every single government on this planet. It is nearly one and the same. So where are we now? On May 12, 2008, the massive earthquake. It killed like 84,000 people in Western China, in Shenzhen, I believe it was. And then now we're dealing with flooding today. I mean, this last 40, 50 days, this flooding is epic to the point where it would break probably a less developed society. And the problem with development is that once this all begins to dry out, look at how many cement pillars, how many foundations have been sunk down to the bedrock, I trust, to support this one single road. And it is like this across all of China. All of this infrastructure is going to have to be examined, decided whether it's fit or not, and then ultimately in one way or another, with the cheapest thing just to be to clean it and then open it. But if there are structural impediments for it to be reopened, then that has to be fixed. So we're dealing with, the fourth turning. The fourth turning is a high and upbeat era of strengthening institutions, weakening individualism, where a new civic order implants the old regime and the old values of the regime decays. The second turning is an awakening, a passionate era of spiritual upheaval when the civic order comes under attack from a new values regime. The third turning is then the unraveling, a downcast era where strengthening individualism and weakening institutions, where the old civic order decays and the new values of the regime implants. And you could make you could say that this potentially is where we've been, maybe back in the 70s during the Vietnam era, and just after this could have begun, that part of the unraveling. And then the fourth turning is simply the crisis, the decisive era of secular upheaval where the values regime propels the replacement of the old civic order with a new one. And this is what the protesters are doing. They're trying to put in front of the people the new values. But I kind of don't think that what they have, the people are buying. I don't think that revolutionary new leader, that inspiring leader, can yet unify the movement. So I still think we're kind of off to the side. All right, the Act of Revolutionary War was one of those big movements the U.S. Constitution approved, and you can kind of see the different generational, about 50 these different periods from one after the other. So we're kind of in where we're beginning to see the potential of the future American war as this fourth turning kind of gets underway. The generational cycle, we're definitely in and past the peak oil, the extraction. We're now the depletion. So we're looking for these new leaders to manifest. Back in the day, it was Benjamin Franklin. And then Lincoln led us through the Civil War. FDR led us through World War II. And is President Trump the one to lead us to or through? But more than likely, we've just gotten to the point of being two, because we have not seen a unification. We have seen the separation, the amping up of the dissonances. So this one is not going to be, this president will not be associated with these three. He's just, in my opinion, just the lead up to the big crisis upon which it will all eventually unfold. All right, so we've got the chaos in the White House, and some feeling the burn. Others are trying to make America great again, swimming through the tide to eventually rescue or save the old. But that, I just don't see that kind of happening. So where we are is the accumulation of all powers, legislative, executive, and judiciary, in the same hands, whether the one, a few, or the many, and whether hereditary or self-appointed or elective, may justly be pronounced the very definition of tyranny. And I would suggest that we've probably been here longer than we're willing to admit. And because that would admit that as citizens, we have not done our job at keeping the agenda at bay. So how do we do this outside of physical safety? And part of physical safety is being able to move, to be mobile, to find that place which would best suit you and your family and your circumstances and situations. And so we've been given a certain kind of money. If you wanted to leave, get out of here, you've got to be able to have some medium of exchange to which you can use to make that great escape, or to hunker down and then, quite literally, as we've seen through this century, buy your way through it. You got to buy off. 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 And so we're going to need some kind of money. So fiat money, if you've been watching these, we kind of know what that is. In 1963, the words "will pay to the bearer on demand," which were removed from all the newly issued Federal Reserve notes. It used to say in silver, "payable to the bearer on demand." The nation had that kind of metal in its armory, his economic armory, to convert these fiat notes, these paper notes, these bank notes into something of value. So fiat money, advantages. Fiat money has a stable value, unlike money based on commodities such as gold, silver, or copper. Something that is usable, and that gives it value. Your grandmother's cookies had value, and in many ways more value than a dollar bill, because you could do something with it. You could consume it. You could trade it. You could give it as a gift. Whereas these little paper slips only have value because the government says that is the medium of exchange that we will take for all debts, public and private. That is it. Otherwise, grandma's cookies are pretty darn good. All right, so the disadvantages of fiat currency is the potential for its value to go to zero, because the paper on which it's printed doesn't have any value to lose any value. You look back 100 years, and I can pretty much guarantee you that this kind of paper will be, just paper. So let's go buy some silver. So you've decided that you've got a little money. You want to get it out of fiat. You can either go buy Apple stock. Curious, but Apple at this point of the time, in my eyes, has probably reached its peak value, because the phones are lasting longer. We don't have the jobs that we used to have to go, and I don't want to say it's discretionary spending, because these devices have become incredibly important in our day-to-day lives. But nonetheless, there is a part of it that is discretionary. AT&T, one of the very, very few companies, actually in their quarterly report said that they had 339,000 subscribers not pay their bill. So a third of 1,000,000 plus of their regular subscribers just didn't pay their bill, and they're trying to work with them, just kind of string them out a little bit longer. Maybe they've waived some fees and so forth and so on, just to try to keep these customers in their stable, because customer acquisition costs can be a little steep, and that's not something you want to have to do. So silver is it's my favorite. I'm just telling you, it's kind of my favorite beast. We can either buy silver bullion. Bullion is gold, silver, other precious metals in the forms of bars, ingots, or specialized coins that are said to maintain its worth better than conventional currencies, fiat currencies, and therefore is kept as a form of emergency currency both by governments and also by citizens. Bullion. This is what the miners went in the hills to go panning for, because they were panning for money. And when you came out of the hills with the silver, with the gold, you could then spend it in the town below. And usually they spent it on mining necessities so they could go get more. So the guy that sold the picks, the barrels, the camping gear to the miners did very, very well. All right, numismatics. It is a study or collection of currency, including coins, token, paper money, and related objects. While numismaticists are often characterized as students or collectors of coins, the discipline also includes the broader study of money and other payment media used to resolve debts, and also the exchange of goods. And you can kind of see in the example here the different kinds of coins. So numismatics literally would go all the way back to Roman, Egyptian, and those ancient, highly collectible exchanges of value. And then junk silver. Junk silver is an informal term used in the United States, the United Kingdom, Canada, and Australia for any silver coin which is in fair or called condition, called meaning pulling it out of circulation, but yet has no numismatic or collectible value above the bullion value that the silver it contains. And these coins are made of 90% silver, so it's not all silver, but it does help it endure the job of being in people's pockets, in the medium of exchange, and so forth. So what I want to do now is head on over to eBay. Let's go buy some. So what I need to do is get out of this little bad boy here, and then we're going to come over here to eBay, bring this baby up. So the question is, and when I started buying silver, this was not quite 20 years ago, and I would get paid on Friday, every other Friday, and so every other Friday I would go down. It wasn't even a mile and a half from work, and there was Shamrock Coin, and you become friends with them, and you're just kind of shopping around for what you'd like. This was before the age of eBay. So I started buying silver, and I didn't know what to begin with. So what I started with were 1 ounce rounds. Just 1 ounce rounds of silver. It seemed to me one of the better values. So you're buying, 1 ounce of silver, and it's usually 0.999% pure. So that was what I was doing. And crazy enough, this was maybe 2002, 2003, and silver was under $5 an ounce. And here we are today at 25, nearly dollars per ounce. So that's a 5-fold increase. And over 20 years, that's a pretty good move, but nothing like stocks. And in many ways, nothing like bonds either, because bonds have gone nearly to full value. And then if we're looking at digital currencies, those have been literally explosive, because in 2009, 10, and 11, they began at zero, and they are wherever they are today. So that's another asset class that we'll look at on Wednesday. So 1 ounce rounds is what I really kind of fell in love with, and that's what I made my collection. However, I also bought junk silver. So let's type that in, JUNKSILVER. And I liked it for a couple of reasons. For me, there is a little history in these guys, in these numismatics. There really is. There's a little silver in there. There's a date, there's a mint. Some of it's rather clear, some of it not so clear. But that was something that I kind of got into. I liked that. I liked the history of those coins. So I bought it. I would buy, well, heck, I think I've got one right here. A tube of silver. And it's, what are they? 64 Ds. So out of Denver. And this tube, when I bought it for, 50 dimes or 25 dimes, $27. $27. You can't get that today. So this is something you buy, and eventually, well, you simply hold. You hold and you hold. And I like the junk coins because in a future time, we're going to have to go back to hard money. That is just an eventuality. And in the Depression era, in the 1930s, a silver dime was a man's wage. Today, our penny in gold terms is, well, let's just say a penny, when it was backed by gold, when the Federal Reserve first showed up on the scene, a penny then would be worth $1.15 today. That much more. So you can see, if we add $1.15 times 10 cents, $15, $20, $15 or so. So let's just do this. Let's just buy this now. I'm going to buy a troy pound bag of silver coins, and I'm going to buy it now because, I've had some silver and it's just time to stock up just a little bit more. So that's where it's going to go. I'm going to use my lovely PayPal, and then that'll show up. I believe it'll show up. From that and log in. You can tell me I haven't done this in a while. Yeah, you can remember me. So that's kind of the cool thing. And you can go shopping. I mean, the prices are competitive. You have a good idea of what you're looking at. If you've got PayPal, you've got some price protection. And it's just kind of good to know you've got a little something else, right there. So the shipping is free, and I'll have a troy pound of mixed U.S. coins. So no junk, so it says, and it's all pre-1965. And then delivery shows up, and off we go. And the other thing that I really, really like is Bitcoin. I think I understand that we'll be dealing with a whole new era of money once we get to the other side. In fact, let's go look at Bitcoin just because there is a little bit of time here. And we're running about 10 grand each, which is up, crazy total. When I first found Bitcoin, it was probably 2012, and it was less than $50, and it was touted as a potential currency that would take money changing out of the hands of the bankers. That honestly thrilled me to no end. Anything to get power out of the hands. And we saw that quote earlier, that anytime a power is collected so tightly into the hands of a few, and they don't have your best interests at hands, then we've got trouble. And we can see that globally, because the United States can sanction people, we can sanction nations, regardless of what it does to the people, that there's a few people at the top of that nation that we're sanctioning, and then the entire population has to pay the price. And for me, there's something just amoral about that. So here's where Bitcoin is. I'm going to go back in the charts, and it's kind of got a crazy chart. If we go all the way back, so we're back in 2014. And we've moved from the 200s when I was first interested back in it in mid-2015. We had an epic move as a lot of retail investors showed up at the end of 2017. We had a nice correction, and that just allows for another time and another opportunity to accumulate. But with what's going on in the world and the gross abuses of nations and their currencies, and because it's all fiat, the Federal Reserve can literally blink of an eye, hit the enter key, and there's $1 trillion new dollars that go out to the banks to keep it all lubricated, to make all these bad bets good. It's not right. Typically, they would have to come back and tax the people and use that money to support the banks, but that doesn't happen. What they could do, what Cyprus did in 2013, which is then close the banks, and then every depositor take a haircut. You lose 5%, 10%, 20%, 30%, a half, it doesn't matter. It's just gone. The next time you go to check your balance on your checking account or your savings account, the money is just gone. And this is the reason why you want to have these kind of assets out of the system. Plain and simple, out of the system. But the thing with the metals is you've got to be able to travel with it. If you're going to travel with silver, this has got to be on your person. And that is a risk. That is absolutely a risk. Try to go through customs or TSA with the metals in hand. And you've got to answer questions. If you've got cryptocurrencies, then you don't. You don't. You just would have to have, someone else to exchange with. And we're seeing more and more merchants that are taking Bitcoin or taking Ethereum, or you set up a bank account in your destination, and you just withdraw into that bank account, and then you've got your funds. So with a piece of paper and about 45 digits, you've got your key and your address, and it could be worth $1 million. Just don't misplace it. All right, good to see what you guys have got going over there. Tracy, it's also commonly used in the creation of electronics, which makes it valuable. Truly. And that's what makes silver so exciting. And that's why I got into it, is because every motherboard, it's a conductor. It's a metallic conductor. It doesn't rust. It's very good at what it does. So is gold. And so these metals have value, and in many ways they're price inelastic, meaning that the manufacturer needs that ounce of gold to create those 10,000 products. And if that ounce of, let's just say, silver is $5 5 years ago, good. It's an affordable cost. But if it becomes $50 or $150, he still has to spend the money to get that necessary ingredient for the product so it can be sold and off to the market. What that means then is his input costs for that object do go up, and ultimately the consumer pays a higher price, and that simply is inflation. All right, guys, that's a little bit of eBay shopping, and I'm kind of excited because within a little bit of time I get a little silver showing up on the in the post office box or at the front door. Either way, it'll come registered. You sign for it, and then you've got it. I think on Wednesday we'll probably do a little Bitcoin buying. I might do a little before Wednesday that you won't see, simply because of, look at the price movement just in the last day. We're up 12%, which is kind of nice and festive. So even in the week, where are we on the week? Maybe we're probably 22%, somewhere in that range within the week. No, it's not going to give us that. That's only 24 hours. So but Bitcoin is waiting for a lot of people to show up, figure it out, what it is, what it can do, and how it can replace the system that we have in place right now. All right, thanks for stopping by, folks. Good to see you in there. And I'll catch you on Wednesday. We'll do a little chit-chat about currencies and probably more electronic currencies. We did that 2 weeks ago. But with the things that are happening in the world, we can always update that a little bit. All right. Take care, everybody. Have a great evening, and I'll see you on Wednesday.